Hello and welcome. I'm Christina Troutman from Business Intelligence Consulting Group. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar titled OBIEE 11g Tips and Tricks. Your presenters today will include Christian Screen and Marty Mersinger. A little about Christian. He is a BICG solution engineer and he's been with us for 2 years. He has 10 years of data warehousing, 5 years of EPM, and 5 years of experience with the OBIEE product. About Marty, he is also a solution engineer and he's been with BICG for almost 5 years. He has 20 years of professional experience and 11 years of experience with OBIEE. A little about the flow of today's event. Both Christian and Marty will present, and then we'll have time at the conclusion of our presentation for a brief question and answer session. We encourage you to ask questions, and they can be submitted anytime through the question pane on your control panel. Also, please be sure to stay until the end of our webinar, as we'll be giving away free training tokens to 2 lucky attendees. Without further ado, let's begin today's presentation. And with that, I hand it over to Christian, who will review the presentation agenda.
Hi everyone, and thank you Christina for the introduction. So today we're looking at tips and tricks of OBIEE 11g, Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition. And what we want to do is step you through some of the cooler points of interest, if you will, having to do with OBIEE 11g. We're going to take a look at utilizing a new function in OBIEE 11g called custom groups. And we're also going to look at some desktop integration with Microsoft Excel, leveraging the new IQY file integration within presentation services. In addition, we want to make sure that we covered some of the administrative side, having to do with some of the new OBIEE 11g administration functions. So we're going to take a look at some of the WebLogic administration server authentication providers, specifically using a relational database. And we're also going to look at administration task flexibility using the recording function of WebLogic server. We're also going to dive into master view detail, which is new to OBIEE 11g, as well as filter pane unions, and then also selection steps and BI charts. So a lot of new, very innovative items coming through with OBIEE 11g, and we hope to explore those in today's session. So let's go ahead and get started with custom groups. For those of us that are familiar with OBIEE, we might be familiar with the concept of binning. And custom groups provides an alternative to this binning concept or this grouping concept. And it's a great way to fit metadata during development cycles. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're an end user and you're creating a report or an analysis or answers, as it was called in 10G, there's often the challenge of mixing existing metadata roll-ups or hierarchies with what might be required of the report. And one way to fit that gap is by using custom groups. So perhaps an end user needs to develop a report with a roll-up that does not currently exist in the metadata. And so what's that end user to do? Well, that user can now use custom groups to build that custom roll-up within presentation services. And custom groups allows for hierarchies to be maintained, and this is different from binning, which doesn't apply that flexibility. So this is leveraging the new hierarchical columns functionality of OBIEE 11g as well. And an old approach to this would be to either create one or more bins to provide that grouping solution, and or to wait for the next development cycle in order to get that change control request to get pushed into the metadata for your subject area. So let me show you really quickly what we're talking about. All right, so let's say we just develop a real quick and dirty analysis, or as it was known in 10G, an answers request. Okay, and as you can see from the screenshot, I'm leveraging the new hierarchical column here, which provides that very intuitive drill down capability. And this hierarchical column is called products hierarchy. And then, of course, I threw in a couple of facts there. Okay? And we can see that we have a nice drill down functionality within the products hierarchy column. Well, the next thing to do in your Results tab is to click on the Custom Group or the New Group icon in the Analysis toolbar. And that's the one in the screenshot there to the far right. And once we click on that button, we're prompted with a wizard. Now, the wizard allows us to create a display name for our custom group, for our new group. And it also allows us to select from multiple elements within the products hierarchy column. And if you look here, we've got on the left side the available columns that we can select from, or the available members we can select from. And on the right side, we've got the ones that we've selected. So I've selected TV, which is actually part of a level, and it has children underneath it. And then I've also selected 7 megapixel digital camera, which is a leaf level, or actually a level that does not have any other members underneath of it. And I'll click the OK button. And then what we can see is that we've actually created a on-the-fly ad hoc grouping for our report. And we've bundled several products into a grouping we've called My Hot Items Group. Okay? And because we've done this using the custom group function, you can see that I've expanded TV, that level, to show LCD, and underneath it LCD 36X, and then likewise plasma. So custom group also allows us to get this flexibility of maintaining a drill down within the hierarchy. That flexibility is just amazing, and we think that's one of the new hot tips and tricks that comes along with OBIEE 11g in presentation services. And we could even take this a step further by leveraging a new function to OBIEE 11g called selection steps. And that's another tip that we're going to cover, that Marty's going to cover here in a few minutes. Okay, so sticking with the presentation side, let's look at some desktop integration. Now, custom groups was a new feature to OBIEE 11g. And likewise is the ability to utilize IQI files. Now, an IQI file is basically a way to pull a query from the web and leverage it in Microsoft Excel. And so this is a little different from actually using the export functionality within presentation services. And it does provide a unique look at extracting data. So one thing that we do want to mention is that this is not the BI Office plugin. Okay, this would be an alternative to that. And with this IQI file in Microsoft Excel, likewise, data can be refreshed within Microsoft Excel, and you can maintain other Microsoft Excel logic. And often this is a request from business analysts to be able to pull the data from the presentation services or from a answers or analysis query, and then of course bring it into Microsoft Excel, throw some custom formatting, add some different logic into it, and then of course be able to maintain that, save it, open it back up, and refresh the data at will. And this web query allows you to do that. Now, you locate this IQI file for each specific analysis request under the Advanced tab when you're creating a new analysis or a saved analysis. Okay, so let's look at a real quick use case. So a real quick use case for this would be end users, again, need a way to get at the data, pull it into Excel, okay, and refresh on the command with the latest data, but retain formatting and current data points. Okay, users need a real simple data set. So IQI is actually very, very flexible for simple queries. Okay, and then of course, if your organization's security standards don't allow for the Microsoft BI Office plugin to be installed on your desktop, then this might be a solution for you. So let's take a look at it with a real quick illustrated demo. So I'm starting again with a quick analysis request that we're building out. Okay. One thing to note here is that the request must be saved before you're able to access the IQI file for this particular request. So here's a basic request we've created, just a couple of columns with a couple of facts. Okay, and then what we can do once we save that analysis request is navigate over to the Advanced tab for that request. And once we're there, one thing I want to point out, if you look at the screenshot, there's actually two hyperlinks that are available for you. The first hyperlink is now a way to get at the portal link to the request. So a use case here would be if you have an intranet or another system where you need to provide a link to a specific analysis request. This is where you can go. You can simply just right-click on that link, select copy link location, or just copy that URL, and you can pass that link along so that whoever clicks on that link takes them directly to this request. Okay? And then, of course, the OBIEE security would apply for single sign-on or if the user needed to actually log on again. Okay. And then the second link is what we're talking about, the web query, the .iqy file. Okay. And once you click on that link, you're going to be prompted to actually download the IQY file or open up the IQY file in Microsoft Excel. Now, as a caveat, we've tested this and it seems to perform very well in Microsoft Excel 2003, but not so well in 2007. And we're not 100% why, but we're not certain why, but that's just some of our findings if this is something you're looking at utilizing. So once you click on that link, as I mentioned, you're prompted to open up the file in Excel or, again, save it to a different location for a later time. And so if you look here at the screenshot, once I open that in Microsoft Excel, something I've left out of the screenshot is that you're actually prompted for your username and password. And it's your username and password that's going to enable you to actually retrieve the data for this particular request. And once you pull the request into Microsoft Excel, you'll see that it pulls itself in as a tabular grid with the title and the column headers. Okay. Now, a couple of things to point out here with that IQY file is that it is completely portable, meaning that you could pass it along, be it an email, etc., to a colleague, have them open it up in their Microsoft Excel, as long as they have credentials to access this data, again, adhering to the security model in your OBIEE implementation, they'll be able to access this data. The IQY file is based solely on the exported analysis criteria itself. Okay, so once you have the IQY file saved from your Advanced tab, that IQY file is a representation of your analysis request as it was saved, or as you click that IQY file link. Okay, and then another thing to note is that this currently works only for data elements. Particularly tabular data elements, so if you want to look at it in a little more detail, the table view. So no charting actually comes across with the IQY file. Okay, and as you can see here, one thing that, again, business analysts, etc., like to point out is that you can include your own formatting, add in your own calculations against this data, save it, and then, of course, once it's saved, you can reopen up this this particular file, and then you can refresh the data at will. Okay, and the way you refresh the data is by using the external data toolbar, which is native to Microsoft Excel. Again, just a key point here: this is not the BI Office plugin; it's the IQY. Okay, so I have a couple more tips to go through, and then I'll turn it over to Marty, who's got a few more as well. I would have felt remiss if we had not included some tips that point out the new administrative functionality of OBIEE 11g. So for those of us involved on somewhat of the administration side of OBIEE 11g, we know that we use WebLogic Administration Console to manage such things as deployments, as well as most of the security aspects. So what I want to point out was leveraging a relational database authentication provider for your OBIEE 11g implementation. Okay, so this happens quite a lot in just sparseness of data and having, sorry, let me recant that statement, not sparseness of data, but disparate sets of data and where our actual users are located. So we can leverage a relational data source to supply that identity information. We can leverage the WebLogic Server Authorization Provider plugin to enable this. And the setup is very similar to setting up an LDAP configuration, similar to OID or Active Directory or Sun LDAP. The one thing I do want to point out, I just had a call with Oracle yesterday, and this was after I put the slides together, but this is not certified with OBIEE 11g. Okay, we're looking for certification for the next patch. However, the setup and configuration, etc., does work, but it's not certified with OBIEE 11g. But it is a tip, a trick I want to point out. Okay, so a use case here again is if you have users from different locations, specifically relational data source, you could leverage this. If you do have relational data source, you might consider just using or importing those users into the WebLogic LDAP repository. So that's also an alternative to this as well, something to look at. And so here's just a real quick way to set this up. You create a new authentication provider in WebLogic Administration Console. We could use the SQL Authenticator. There's two types of relational feeds for the authentication provider. One is called the SQL Authenticator, and the other is called the read-only SQL Authenticator. And the SQL Authenticator allows you to actually maintain your users from the WebLogic Administration Console, where the other approach only lets you read from the database that you're pulling from. Okay, and likewise, like I said, you can actually control the users. So if you can see from the screenshot here, we've got the combination of the default WebLogic users as well as the ones coming from the relational source. Okay, and the next one that we're going to cover is the administration task coming from WebLogic Server. So managing or assisting with your administration task using the recording capability of WebLogic Server. And if you're like me and you do some administration of OBIEE, WebLogic was a very interesting addition to the OBIEE suite. And so anything to make life easier, I'm all for. And so what I want to introduce for those who aren't familiar is a trick to basically manage some of the, I'll say some of the tedious administration functions that take place within WebLogic Server. And so WebLogic Server provides a recording function. It starts getting a little more technical, and it gets us into some WebLogic scripting, which is called WLST. And again, this is going to be more for your administrator, but it's something worth noting. There are some restrictions on what can't be recorded. So an example of that would be starting a managed server, for those who are familiar with that. But mostly everything else is wide open to be recorded and replayed. Okay? And of course you can set preferences, you can add prefixes to your script, suffixes to your script. So what's a use case around this? Why would we ever touch this? Okay? So if you're an OBIEE administrator or a web server admin, and you have to replicate several common functions and tasks across multiple environments. So you have to do the same thing in dev as you would do in test and QA and production. It would be great to have just kind of a consistent means where you kind of do it one time, you save it, and you press play and it happens in the next environment. Okay, and that's what recording allows you to do. Whereas a legacy approach, you're doing this sort of administration maintenance, you have to either take notes or step through some other process to reproduce it manually across each environment. So another illustrated demo, simply because working with a live demo here would not be the best thing for this webinar. So if you open your WebLogic Server Administration Console, you'll see that you have in the header, you have the ability to select Home, Logout, Preferences, and then there's a record link right next to a little graph that's actually grayed out. And that's going to be grayed out until you've click the lock and edit button, which is to the left. Okay, and then once you click that record button, your recording session will start. And there's no real big prompt or anything to tell you that you're actually recording. You're just recording. Okay, and if you hover over the record button, it'll ask you to stop recording. But as you're recording, you can conduct any task within this WebLogic Administration console. And so for this example, I'm simply creating a new JDBC data source. Okay, so I step through the JDBC data source creation wizard, and I go through all the steps. Okay, and then once I'm finished, I click on Finish, click on Save. Then I'll click on the record button again, which will stop the recording. Okay, and once that ends the recording, I'll be prompted with a message. And if you look here, I've got a green message, and it says, "The recording session has ended. The script recorded to this location on my server, etc., or my workstation, etc." Then what I have the ability to do is navigate to the location of that script that was created. So if you see here, we've got a couple of Python scripts with the extension .py that were actually created, and with some crazy numeric suffix to it. And if I open that up, I see that I have pretty much core Python script that relates to the WLST scripting language. And then, as an administrator, it's up to me to take that script, save it, or execute it. And then, of course, we can execute that on subsequent environments so that our job is fairly simple and straightforward going forward. Okay, so that is the initial look at some of the tips and tricks. And what I'm going to do is pass it over to my colleague Marty Mersinger, who's going to walk you through a few more tips and tricks for today's session. So Marty, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Christian. Like I said, Christian said, we've got a few more tips and tricks that we want to go into. So we're going to take some of these you may have seen aspects of previously, and we want to take a deeper dive into them and see what we can actually do with these things. So the first one is the master detail report. Many of you have been on other of our webinars would have seen some of this already at a high level. And we want to see, look at deeper into the functionality and then kind of look at, where does this become useful at. So the first thing we're going to do is just create a simple analysis, picking our subject area, picking our columns. And this is where we're going to configure our master configuration, our master view. So you start out with just a sample analysis. Then you pick the column properties for the column that you want to base your listening channel on. So in this case here, I'm picking my per name quarter, and I open up my column properties as this, and you can see I've got an option here for under the value. I can select the interaction to be send master detail event, and I can specify my channel ID. This could be any ID. It's a very unique ID to that. And so you set that up and basically save that. Once you've done that, then we're going to go in and we'll create a detail. Now, this particular detail view is based on the same analysis. So basically I'm creating both the master as well as the detail view from the same analysis and get them both. But now on the view, on the detail view, I can come into its properties, which is this little icon, has the XYZ in the middle. That gives you the properties. It'll open up the graph properties since I selected that. And there's this checkbox for listen to master detail events. So there all I do is enter in the same ID, the channel ID that I put in for my master, in this case MDS2. Click OK, save that, and then I can put this onto a dashboard, and I can see that if I click on a per name quarter value, such as 2008 Q2, my detail is going to automatically navigate to the same quarter and show me that information for that particular period of time. So now let's look at it. This is what you typically see from a lot of sample demos around this. But now let's go a little bit farther down into this. What else can we do? Right? So here I'm going to create a second detail view, totally independent of my first one. I'm going to pick a totally new analysis and save it, and not going to set anything, but I do have my per name quarter. I got to have my same listening column that I'm sending my events on. So I set up that analysis, and again I'll set this as a pie chart. I go into the view properties and I do the same thing. I set up my listener, check the checkbox, and set up my event channel. So now I've got two details, totally independent and being able to listen. So put those on a dashboard, add it in, and sure enough, when you check it out, you can do the same thing. You'd be able to select a value from the per name quarter, and both detail views will then listen on that event of the MDS2 and respond to it appropriately. So, all right, so that's easy enough. But let's go a little bit further down now. So here we're going to create a totally new master view from everything else. So not even the same analysis, totally new analysis, different filter criteria, again using the same time frame, again using the per name quarter. But now for this master view, I'm going to specify the channel MDS3. So it's going to send out its messages on a new channel. So we're going to reopen up our second one that we modified, which was the pie chart. And notice now I can add multiple channels for this view to listen upon, and it's just going to be comma separated. So I can have as many masters as I want. Of course, you're going to kind of base it on your real estate within your dashboard. So this one here, put it in there. So listening on the master chat, the first master, right? Both of my detail views respond as expected. Now I've got my second master up in the upper right, and if I respond to that, then my detail view number 2 does respond because I did code it. That's what I would expect. And my first one, which I did not modify, my first detail view I did not modify, that does not respond. So here I got a lot of leverage, a lot of capabilities within mastering this and being able to leverage this information. Now, where does this become useful at? Is when you're dealing within the 10G environment, if you needed to do something like this where you wanted to be able to have a summary level view of information and then be able to get down into additional details of it, you basically had to use navigation to get to there. Now with the master detail, what that allows you is to put that master summary information and your detail information all on the same dashboard without having to navigate back and forth. So I can look at Q2 in one instance, I can switch to Q3 without having to change past dashboard pages, without navigating back and forth, and be able to get down to that detail. So it opens up a lot of possibilities within by using master detail reporting. Now finally, it's like, all right, there are some requirements around the detail view. You can see here, these are the graph, the funnel graph, gauge table, pivot table. These are all things that can be leveraged as a detail view. One of the things that you'll notice is like map views are not an option for a detail view. So keep that in mind. The other thing is the placement of the event column. We were using the per name quarter. They have to be in a particular place and they have to be visible in order for the master detail view to actually work. So the placement is specific based on the type of view that you're creating. It's either going to be one or two places where table and pivot table are in the page prompt, and for anything else it's either going to be in the prompt or the section area. So now let's take a look at filter panes and unions. This came about because I was helping a person and they were creating a union and they needed to make some modifications. And they ended up coming across an issue. So I figured it would be a good idea to kind of help identify this and expand upon it. So first we created a simple analysis. So we want to go through the same steps that this person was doing, creating a union statement. And they put in a filter for that particular analysis. Then they've added in a union by clicking on the icon in the upper right to add an additional component. And so we see, all right, we've added that in. We added in a new analysis based on that. So before we had brand revenue, now we're looking at company revenue, combining them in a union statement. So we end up getting in that, and then they went ahead and went into the results, queried it, everything was fine. But now they needed to make some edits. So they came back to the criteria tab, and this is what they saw. It's like the filter views were not there. So you could click on an individual criteria, and you could not see the views, such as we clicked on here, which is our first one, and then we see the brand and revenue, but our filters are not visible. So it's like, could not find them. There's no drop down that was noticeable from the criteria to be able to leverage that. So what we found is right up in the upper top where you've got these overlapping funnels is basically a show and hide filter pane. So for whatever reason, the union statement is specific to this, is that when you create the union and you go to results and come back, the filter pane automatically hides. So by clicking on this, those filter panes become viewable again, and you're able to edit those filters as normal. Now, any other kind of analysis that we created, is just a standard report, we don't see this disappearing filter panes. So that's why I figured it very important to make note of where this little icon is located, so that you can find that. Also, it helps cover up your real estate. So if you're looking, depending on your resolution of your screen, you can close those filters if you need some additional space for yourselves. Now the next one is selection steps, and what good are they? To me, when I first saw them, it's like, these are just filters. It's like, what good is this? So I looked at it from an OBIEE documentation standpoint. And filters basically is applied before the aggregation and affect the query results that are going to the database or your source of information. Where your selection steps, they're applied after the aggregation. So it's like, okay, that makes a whole lot of sense, and now it's just kind of muddied the water for me. Still want to know more. What good are they? They're still filters. So came up with a little example here, where this is the goal that we want to be able to get to. This is a set of products based on products that had greater than $1 million in 2008. All right, but I want to be able to see not only 2008 but the following years as well, and see how are they trending. So what I first do is look at it from a 10G standpoint. If I had to implement this in 10G, what would I have to go through? So the first thing I'd have to do is create my product list. So in order to get that, I'd have to apply the filter that I want to my selected column, which is products. And sure enough, yes, I can get my selected list of products just by that. Next, and I save that request. Next, I go ahead and create my primary report request. So I create that, put in my 3 years of filters for that in order to start that out. Next, I got to bring in my product list from 2008 as an additional filter. So basically, I'm going to create another filter based on existing results. When I do that, I'm going to set my filter based on product to be equal to any of those that are in my product list. So a number of different steps you got to go through. You got to save two requests in order to achieve your results, but sure enough, you can obtain it. So yes, it does work. That's fine. I can get to my information. But now let's look at it from an 11G standpoint, utilizing the selection steps. Does it make it easier? So first of all, I start with my simple analysis with my 3 years of information. That's my ultimate goal anyway, is to be able to compare these 3 years of information for my products. So if I do that, I created that simple. Now I go in and I can open up my selection step layout once I go into my results. And you notice you've got various places you can add selection steps. So I'm going into the products and I'm going to apply a condition. I've got a couple other options here, but I'm going to apply condition to add basically a filter. This is after the aggregation point. Once I do that, I can set up the filter condition based on the criteria of 2008 and my revenue is greater than $1 million. With that, then I go in and sure enough, very simply, very quickly, I've now been able to achieve the same results within a single analysis, which required multiple analysis before and took me a few more steps to be able to achieve. So very quickly I was able to get to where I wanted to go. Selection steps made a lot more sense when I started looking at it from this viewpoint rather than just looking at them as a simple filter. Now there were a couple other options that are available by utilizing selection steps, and leave that for you guys to look and investigate further in. So finally, the BI charts. Right? We know we've got a totally new charting engine with 11G, and we wanted to take a look at one of the things I was curious about is, especially with 10G, we had a limited number of charts available to us, and I always wondered, it's like, what else is out there? What's available? And I wanted to find out, can I leverage those? And if so, how? So here again, we got a totally new charting engine. Can we do the same thing? So first of all, let's look at, we got the new charting engine is the data visualization tool, which is part of the application development foundation. And you can see we've got about a dozen different chart types and graphs that we can leverage. So I took, just narrowing in on some specifics, let's look at the vertical and horizontal. If I look at it just from the visualization tool viewpoint, there's a total for that mix of 2 types. There's 16 different charts out there that I'd like to be able to possibly leverage. You can see on my side, it's like, okay, only out of those 16, only 4 of those are actually available through OBIEE. Now you may be able to play around with some things, be able to get to what you needed to. So OBIEE still has a good variety over what it had in 10G, but I still want to be able to kind of, how can I get more out of my tool? So we can see we've got a number of different dual Y. We've got split bars, a lot percentage bars. The percentage bars, for those that may not know it, is where the bar is always at 100%. And you're basically divvying the percentage out of your information within that bar. So what's missing in the OBIEE side is like, okay, the stock charts, they weren't there. Stock charts may not, they're nice for stocks, but they also can be leveraged for other purposes. The other thing is we're very limited from a dual Y-axis perspective, and also the percent bar is not there. So kind of looking at it, you can see here's what I've got. Now some of this stuff, 2D versus 3D, that's all different property settings that you can do. So we can leverage some additional, but really I've got just the basic information without, how do I do a split? If I wanted to do a split Y or a dual Y-axis, I've got the line and bar combo, so that would give me an option there, but it doesn't give me the option for the bars. So where can I get more information? It's like, okay, BI Publisher. I look at BI Publisher. Now that it's totally integrated within 11G, it makes it a lot more useful to me than previously. I don't have to be, an XML coder to be able to leverage this. And if I look at it just from a bar perspective, I can see the BI Publisher now has a lot more options, and a lot of these other types are now totally available within the BI Publisher, which were not available through the primary OBI. So I can look at my splits. I can look at doing dual Y bars, things along those lines, which I couldn't leverage before. Now I've got those available. But still, if you look at it, if you take out the Pareto here, for example, right, we still don't see the full spectrum of possibilities. Right? So I needed to look further. It's like, if I wanted to leverage some of these other ones, how can I get to them? Stocks still is not an option. What if I wanted stocks for, for whatever reason? Maybe I may, depending on my type of data. What else can I do? So we looked at it from the BI Publisher standpoint because here we have a lot more control. So if you look when you create a template, a BI Publisher template, and you put a chart on that template, you basically are going to have code very similar to this. Now this one here is for a pie chart, but it gives you the same, the syntax, and it's basically just XML and XSL code. And you basically using the XSL is where you're putting your data elements, your values into place. Everything else is standard XML code. It's not going to change much from one chart to another. So it's like, okay, gives me an idea. Now, this particular technique was not developed by me. Basically, I got this from Tim Dexter, who's Oracle's BI Publisher guru. Has a lot of wealth of information, and he had done this in 10G, and I kind of wanted to see, does it still work in 11G? And sure enough, it does. So if BI Publisher doesn't have it itself, what you can do is you can see I've got a little graph here, a little screenshot here. This is the gallery of the visualization tool. What's contained from a visual standpoint. So I can see, all right, from my bar, I've got all 8 possibilities open to me, including my floating stack. From a horizontal bar, I have all 8 possibilities there as well. I can leverage the stock. I can see it. I've even got sample layouts I can see down through here. So now the question is, how can I get to this visualization and be able to leverage it? And let me jump because they seem to have missed a few of my slides here. But let me switch over real quick here, and I can pull this guy up real quickly. So what we're looking at is, got from there, where else look. So now we look at it. Now we need this graph file. This graph file is basically an XSD file which has all of the options, possibilities of what BI Publisher graphs can contain. Defining legends, defining all the types. You can see on the right-hand side, we've got all of the different possible chart combinations from a bar, horizontal, vertical. They exist there, which means I can then leverage this as if I can read this information in another way. Now, looking at it within an editor, I can then see the interrelationship between these elements and also get all the way down to the type of information that needs to be entered in, such as a label requires a string. So by having that information, I can go into JDeveloper and I can create a project based on that XSD file. If I do that and create a very simple sample XML file from that, I can then get me a visualization. You can see on the left-hand side, I've got my chart structure. This is the XSD file in a structural format within JDeveloper. Also, you can see I've got a sample chart up here. So in this case here, it's a percentage bar. It wasn't available other than through BI Publisher. Now I've also got, right above it, I've got all the various properties. I can define whether or not I want a legend, where I want my legend at. I can have how many series. So here I've got two series, Group A, Group B. If I wanted 3, I could put 3 in. I can add whatever I needed to from this point. and change my properties. I can set my colors, things along that line. So a lot of options I've got from a visualization standpoint makes it much simpler to work with in order to generate the XML code that I'd need to leverage within a BI Publisher template. So if I do that and if I save my changes, so like I can open up, this was a bar horizontal %, I can open up that XML code that I've saved from my project. I can open that up, and now I've got all the same XML code that I would need to be able to place into a BI Publisher template for that particular graph. So the only thing left then is to be able to put in my XSL specific code around where I'm pulling my data from, what fits in. So very quickly, that gives us the option to be able to leverage every possible graph that's out within this tool in some manner. Now, I plan on doing some additional information or providing additional information around specifics around this particular approach, giving some more solid examples of this, but it should give you enough to start thinking about how it can leverage additional products. There's other things out there within the ADF that you can leverage because 11G is built on ADF completely. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Christina and to close things out. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marty. If you could just go to the next slide then. Great. Just a few things before Q&A. I want to tell you a little bit about BI Consulting Group. We're the largest consulting partner dedicated exclusively to Oracle BI and EPM. We are an Oracle Gold partner, and our average consultant has over 3+ years of OBI experience. Our average consultant has more than 10 years of BI and data warehouse experience. We have more than 280 successful Oracle BI projects under our belt, and customers are #1 to us. We are customer-driven, 100% committed to project quality and customer satisfaction. Next slide, Marty. Just one quick announcement. We do have some new webinars coming up. We just announced a new addition to the BICG webinar series, and that is a webinar on the BICG Impact product. This product helps you gain insight into your OBI deployment using the product itself. And we have a special promotional offer going on right now. If you purchase Impact by April 29th, you can receive the 2010 price and a free upgrade to OBIEE 11g. So you definitely want to take advantage of that. If you'd like more information and to see a demo of the solution, you can register to attend one of our webinars on Wednesday, April 6th or Wednesday, April 20th. And you can simply register by going to our website at www.biconsultinggroup.com. Next slide. Okay, wrapping things up, I wanted to give away some free training. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. 2 free BICG University training tokens go to Kathy McGraw from Macy's and Christopher Lewis from SUNY, State University of New York. I will send you an email following this webinar with more instructions for how to receive your free training. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Christian and Marty for the Q&A session.
Thanks, Christina. It looks like we have a few minutes to dive into a couple questions. So congratulations, Kathy and Christopher, on getting those the training award. So very good deal. BICG training is absolutely fantastic, especially for our 11G training. Okay, so I'll just jump into this with a couple of questions. We've got just a few more minutes left. So if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in into the webinar chat there. So I had a question regarding the custom groups. Someone asked a question if using those custom groups, based on the example I showed, would we be double counting dollars? And the answer to that question is yes. Clearly the example I was showing you was just a quick and dirty one. But yeah, you would be double counting if you had all products shown, and then you created a custom group including some of those products from above. So this is where something Marty talked about, selection steps, can come into play to kind of offset that, that double counting. And then there's something we didn't cover today. We kind of took out something called calculated items. So where you can actually do some math before you actually get that grand total. So a lot of new features in OBIEE 11g that provide a lot of really neat flexibility for doing things like that.
Yeah, let me take one of these questions here. There's a question about many times they have a different report, multiple reports plotted against different types of dates, and whether or not how can you get a single prompt to be able to handle those various types. Not knowing exactly what types you're meaning, whether or not it's a variation or if it's actual the date column itself is different. What you might want to look at is your presentation variables. You can define a presentation variable at a prompt level and then feed it, use that, and you can even use some of the cast functions to be able to break out, like specific months, years, things like that around that, and look at that to leverage your reports. And there's one other one let me grab real quick here. The question was, can the master view pass multiple parameters on the row to the detail view? I have not tried that. It may be possible, but remember, your prompts or your listening events have to be defined within a specific area of your layout, and I don't think you're going to be able to put more than one in some of those areas, which is going to limit you. So you might want to look at some alternatives around what you're trying to pass. But there may be some other options for you rather than to do that.
Okay. And Marty, I've got two good ones here as well. So someone asked a question. They're looking for information on 11g certification with Oracle EPM and OBIEE Fusion Intelligence Solutions. So I'll just throw out quickly. That's kind of it's a wide scope question, right? I can say that BI Consulting Group, we've been a beta testing partner with OBIEE 11g, mid last year when they released the beta for us to go in with, and we've been diving in there, integrating EPM and OBIEE 11g since mid last year. So we've done a lot of cool things. We've got some clients implementing that right now. I'd have to understand the scope, and we could definitely help you get the information you're looking for. So then the other question was, with custom groups, can custom groups, are they available in a single analysis, or can they be saved and used in multiple analysis? So the really cool thing about custom groups is they actually become objects. So you can actually save those out just like you can a filter or a dashboard prompt, and you can kind of use those, if you will, globally. Clearly it has to apply to that specific dimension and column structure, whatever you're using that custom group from. But yeah, you can save it and you can apply it on multiple analysis, yes.
One final one that came in is in regards to presentation variables, and it's whether or not you can use multiple values within a presentation variable. They have not changed from 10G to 11G, so other than how you define them, that has changed, but it's still really you're looking at a single value per presentation variable just as you were in 10G.
And Mario, we've got one more question. I guess we have 2 minutes left, so we can kind of fit all this in. A question from one team, can we demo or talk a little bit about OLAP style hierarchies? So I briefly touched on it looking at custom groups. OBIEE 11g has done an amazing job at something called hierarchical columns. So it basically allows you to clearly model your metadata so you can have your lineage and your hierarchies. But then when you get to the presentation layer, you've got that single column, hierarchical column that allows you to drill down with a very nice, intuitive, native, user-friendly drill down capability through your hierarchies, and providing that OLAP style that a lot of us are familiar with in analytics. It's a very strong concept. You can apply security at different levels. You can apply filtering at different levels. So it's really great addition to OBIEE 11g. And we should have a webinar just on that. We should have a webinar just on hierarchies, but maybe that's something to look at in one of our next webinars.
I'm on it, Christian.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks again to everyone for joining us today for the webinar. We'll be sending an email follow-up shortly, probably tomorrow, with a link to the PowerPoint PDF of the presentation as well as a link to the recording. Of course, if you have any remaining questions, don't hesitate to email us at info@biconsultinggroup.com or reach out to one of today's presenters. We thank you again, and we look forward to working with you. Have a great day.